Okay, welcome to Gospel Backgrounds number 10. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about a prophet without honor. That's a statement that's recorded in all four Gospels, John 4, Luke 4, Mark 6, and interestingly enough, Matthew 13. So Matthew places it quite a bit later in his Gospel. All right, so our roadmap for this lesson, we're going to start by picking it up at the end of John chapter 4, and we'll talk about the official from Capernaum who comes to visit Jesus over in Cana and requests that his son be healed, and Jesus does that. And then at the synagogue at Nazareth, Jesus declares that he is the Messiah spoken of in the Tanakh, which is the Hebrew Bible, or what we might call the Old Testament. So all of that book speaks of Jesus, and that's what Jesus is declaring at Nazareth. Notice it's not a seeker-friendly, all-inclusive message. He actually gives a message calling out their unbelief, and so we'll dig into that. And then we'll conclude with Jesus escaping the mob that wants to throw him off a cliff, and then Jesus will then make his way to Capernaum. We always want to start by reminding ourselves that the scripture is the ultimate source of truth and not any commentator, and definitely not me. We read that in Acts 17:11 that says, although those Jews in Berea were more noble than those in Thessalonica because they received the word with all eagerness, or the King James Version says with all readiness of mind, they search the scriptures daily or examine the scriptures daily to see whether these things be so. So always remember that the scripture is the final word of authority. I'm going to shut the video off now and we'll pick it up with John chapter 4. All right, so we picked up in Samaria, and the woman went into the town, and all the men of the town came out and said, now we believe. And so now we pick up with John 4, verse 43. After 2 days, Jesus departed for Galilee, for Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his hometown. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, having seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the feast, for they too had gone to the feast. So I've got some of the geography in blue just to remind us that these are real events in real places. What's interesting here is the phrase "a prophet has no honor in his hometown." The synoptic gospels, so Matthew, Mark, and Luke, have this after the rejection. John puts it before he even goes to Galilee. So it's just kind of interesting there. One thought is that the reason Jesus headed north, if you remember back at the start of the chapter, was the Pharisees noted he was baptizing more people than John. So possibly Jesus felt he was becoming too popular too quickly. This could potentially have led to trouble with the Jerusalem establishment, including arrest and trial and all that before his appointed time. So we remember he says frequently, my hour has not yet come. So the thought here is he headed to Galilee, and specifically to Nazareth, where he might not be quite so popular. Jerusalem is really hype, even today, is hypercharged religiously. Obviously, today we've got 3 major religions claiming it as home. So someone like Jesus at that time would have been, causing a great stir, where Galilee's up in the country and it's a little more quiet. Here's a map showing the journey. So at the bottom you can see the woman at the well, which is where we left off in the last video at Shechem and Sychar, and you can see Jacob's well. And it's about 35 miles straight north through. You leave the hill country, and then it kind of flattens out into the Jezreel Valley there, and it's pretty flat and straight, direct route right on up into Nazareth. John places Jesus' return to Galilee and subsequent rejection to Nazareth immediately after his visit with the Samaritan woman at the well. Other Gospels have this rejection at Nazareth, we'll see, following the temptation. So a little bit of question on which events happened in which order. One commentator pointed out that if we adhere to a strict chronology, we have yet to have the disciples formally called yet. Sometimes when we're looking back in the 21st century, all these events kind of blur together. But if we're laying them out chronologically, not to say that view is correct, but perhaps after the first Passover, before they've been formally called, maybe they had to return back to their day jobs, and that could be one of the reasons why they had to go back to Nazareth after 2 days in Samaria. So John 4 continues, so he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And at Capernaum there was an official whose son was ill. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said to him, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. The official said to him, sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, go, your son will live. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. So note, I have in blue on this slide, note the geographic detail. So we can pinpoint these places on a map and we can kind of track along where these events were occurring. And so one reason that the maybe Peter, James, John, and Andrew were back in Capernaum doing their day jobs, and then they saw this official, and then they said to him, hey, you need to go see Jesus and he can help you, and we hear he's in Cana right now, so go head over there. And I just love the fact that the man believed the word immediately. John records two of Jesus' visits to Cana. So the more famous one is the water into wine, and of course here in chapter 4. This is a picture of Kirbet Cana, which is likely the Cana of Galilee. There are actually two contenders for what might have been Cana, and I'll show you them on the map on the next one. So the likely one is where the blue arrow is pointing. If you look down to the southeast, you see another Cana with a question mark. This is more, the first one is more likely to be the site of Cana in 1st century AD. They're both, neither one is that far from Nazareth, and so very easy to get to. Josephus notes Cana is more consistent with where you see the number 4 there. So the alternate candidate to the southeast is more popular because I'm keeping my tongue in my cheek. What tours usually do is they'll stop in Mount Carmel for Elijah and the showdown with the priest of Baal. Then they'll head over here to Megiddo, and then they'll head straight to Nazareth to Cana, and then on to the Sea of Galilee. So if I could be tongue in my cheek, the other Cana is kind of popular because it's it's on the way for the tour buses, and they don't have to go out of their way. So, but anyway, it's more likely that first one. This is a picture of Capernaum, where the official hailed from. We will spend a whole another video talking all about Capernaum. It's obviously Jesus' home base of operations. So once he is rejected in Nazareth, he'll move his center to Capernaum. It was also very important and strategic in Roman antiquity. It's been extensively excavated. Here you can see the remains of some 1st century houses in the foreground, and that structure in the background is actually the Great Synagogue at Capernaum. The lighter stones you see are from the 3rd century, but you can't really see it in the picture, but there's a basalt black stone foundation from an earlier synagogue, and that is we're almost positive that that's the synagogue of Jesus' day. Jesus was definitely there. He taught there, and it's really the highlight of any trip to Israel is to walk through Capernaum. It's right on the water. It's just very beautiful location. So again, if we entertain the theory that the disciples were returning home, and maybe you had Peter and Andrew going back to their fishing gigs, they learn about this official whose son is near death, and they say, hey, you better go see Jesus because he can help you. We got back from Jerusalem and he did some great things, and we hear he's in Cana now. So that speculation, but it could be what happened. As he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he began to get better, and they said to him, yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. The father knew that this was the hour when Jesus had said to him, your son will live, and he himself believed, and all his household. This was now the 2nd sign that Jesus did when he came from Judah to Galilee. One thing that kind of struck me is if you look at the John chapter 3, and then there's 2 separate events in chapter 4, it reminds me of Acts 1:8, and we'll look at that on the next slide. I just saw an interesting connection with Acts 1:8. So you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, and to the end of the earth. So if we look at John 3 and 4, we start with Nicodemus. That took place in Jerusalem. Nick is someone who should have had complete knowledge. Jesus corrected him, and he believes. And then in John chapter 4, we are at Samaria. He travels through Judea and Samaria, gets to Samaria and sees the woman at the well. She had, interestingly, incomplete knowledge. So Jesus filled in those missing pieces, and then she believed. And then the ends of the earth, so we're now in Galilee, and he's healed this official's son. And if we assume that the official is a Roman, then really the ends of the earth would have been the Roman Empire, because especially to the west with Africa, northern Africa and Spain and England, that was really the known world at the time, is what was covered by the Roman Empire. So interesting, we see this model, this trilogy of Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the end of the earth. Mark and Matthew have shorter versions of the story. Luke has all the details, so most of the presentation will focus on Luke, but let's just go ahead and read the Mark and Matthew versions just to kind of set the table and see where we're headed. Mark 6:1. He went away from there and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. And on the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and among his relatives and in his own household." And he could do no mighty work there except that he laid hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief, and he went about the villages teaching. Matthew has much the same version of this as Mark does. What is interesting is where Matthew places this. Matthew places this much later in his book, later in his ministry, and verse 53 references had finished these parables. Those are the kingdom parables. So the kingdom of heaven is like and then there's 7 parables that Jesus read there. So this is after all of that. So we'll just go ahead and pick it up here. Verse 53, and when Jesus finished these parables, he went away from there, and coming to his hometown, he taught them in their synagogue, so that they were astonished, and said, "Where does this man get this wisdom and these mighty works? Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother Mary called Mary, and are not his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? And are not all of his sisters with us? Where did this man get all these things?" And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own household." And he did not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief. So it doesn't say he didn't do any mighty works. It says many mighty works. Luke has the much more detailed version, so we'll transition into Luke on the next slide. Now let's look at Luke 4. Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit to Galilee, and a report about him went out through all the surrounding country. And he taught in their synagogues, being glorified by all. So most of us would read verse 14, and we would just say, hey, Jesus made the walk from Samaria to Galilee. Or if you're reading directly in Luke, right before this, verse 14 was the temptation, so we would just read that and assume he went from the wilderness up to Galilee. Luke points out that it was in the power of the Spirit. And I call this out because these little nuggets are all over Scripture, these details. And there, one teacher said a normal, well-adjusted reader would just read past these, but once you start noticing, you're no longer a normal, well-adjusted reader. So option 1, there was something supernatural about this particular journey. We aren't told exactly what it was. We do know that he had just had a showdown with the devil in the wilderness, so possibly it could have been that. Or it could have just been that he was led by the Spirit to go through Samaria for his divine appointment at the well. So we know that's part of it. Option 2 is really every time you and I venture out and we reach our destination, it can only be by the power of the Spirit and God protecting us and watching over us. So that's a good way to look at it as well. Here is a couple of wide shots of Galilee. It's just absolutely beautiful country. In the Old Testament times, Galilee was part of the inheritance of the northern tribes. So Zebulun, Naphtali, a little bit of Asher to the extreme north. The view at the top shows the region west of the Sea of Galilee. Horns of Hattin are this overlook where you can go up on top there and see the view of the lake. It's absolutely stunning. And then the bottom is north towards Cana, the place of Jesus' first sign in the Gospel of John. So we can have this you see very lush, very green. It gets a lot of rain, and again, just very beautiful. Luke notes he taught in their synagogues and was praised by all. This is a picture of the Chorazin synagogue. Scripture doesn't record Jesus' visit to Chorazin, but we assume he was there because it was one of the three cities that he condemned: Chorazin, Bethsaida, and actually Capernaum. Despite the mighty works done in you, despite everything you've seen, you will still not believe. And so he pronounces a woe. So a lot of the synagogues in Galilee are very well preserved, relatively speaking. It's quite a treat to go there, and you're walking in and around these areas where Jesus himself walked and where the disciples walked, and it's quite a treat. Okay, Luke 4, Jesus came to Nazareth where he has been brought up, and as was his custom, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he had anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives, recovering sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." There's a great place in Nazareth. It's called Nazareth Village, and it's like a living museum. I have not been there, but it's definitely on my bucket list. I've just heard amazing things about it. So this display suggests what the scene might have looked like in the Nazareth synagogue when Jesus stood up to read the scriptures. You can see the scroll. There's oil lamps and that kind of thing. Nazareth is very tiny. It's not unreasonable to think everyone may have been related, so this could have been near family, once or twice removed. What's interesting is Nazareth comes from the word netzer, which, if I can get that on the screen here, it comes from Isaiah 11. "Then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, and a branch or netzer from his roots will bear fruit." So really, the Nazareth could really be called Branch Town, and it could be where the group of members of of David's family, David's offspring, kind of congregated up here. He opened the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord." So what many consider to be the greatest archaeological discovery occurred in 1947 in an area down by the Dead Sea known as Qumran. In a previous video, we mentioned the Qumranites and the Essenes, which were really a breakaway sect that resisted the corruption of the Sadducees in Jerusalem. What they did was they meticulously copied every book of the Bible, except for Esther. Esther was never found. Along with hundreds of other religious and secular documents, and they're fairly well preserved, all things considered, considering it's been a couple thousand years. One of the major finds, though, was a complete copy of the book of Isaiah, and the portion that Jesus read is from Isaiah 61, and you can see the white box down at the lower part of the screen there. This Isaiah scroll is on a replica of it is on display at the Israeli Museum. And again, it's just so cool to see something that old and that well preserved. And really from a linguistic standpoint, translation standpoint, it's nearly identical to a copy of Isaiah that was written 1,000 years later. Previous to the Dead Sea Scrolls, the latest copy of the Old Testament we had was from about 900 AD. And so here's something that predates that by 1,000 years, and it's still just spot on. The picture above is the cave where this was found, famous cave number 4 in Qumran. There's a whole interesting story about how they were found and then how they eventually came to be in Israel's hands. And of course, this is right after 1947, or right after World War II, right before Israel was about to be founded as a nation again. So lots of excitement around that time, and some great stories around that, which we'll have to get into another time. So this is the actual text of what Jesus read from Isaiah 61, with the exception of this part in blue here. The recovering of sight to the blind is something that Luke added, and there is some linguistic reasons why he might have done that. The word opening here often in the Hebrew means not opening a door, but like opening of your mind or opening vision. So it could have been a clarification there. What is more interesting is that Jesus stops right there to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, and then he closes the scroll and says, "This day is this fulfilled." He does not read the day of vengeance of our God to comfort all who mourn. Why? Because that would have been kind of breaking the model, right? So his first coming, he came to do everything in white, and then his second coming will be the wrath and the vengeance. So it's interesting that we would say that he stopped at this comma here, and then closed the scroll, and then says, "I am the anointed one of whom, as Isaiah speaks, I am the Messiah," and so that's he is really asserting himself there. Also, as background, in those days, the speaker would read the scroll, read the Bible portion, and then they would sit down to give their talk. So Jesus quite probably gave a very long discourse on this, in addition, and maybe concluded it with, "Today is the scripture fulfilled." It's interesting. It says the very next verse is, "And all spoke well of him, and marveled at the gracious words that were coming from his mouth. And they said, Is this not Joseph's son?" So they spoke well of him until they heard what he had to say next. And then I don't know if this should really be a but. This could be, "But some said, Is this not Joseph's son?" So there's some doubt casting in there. And so Jesus picks up on that, and he says, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Physician, heal yourself.' What we have heard you did at Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well." So apparently they heard about the healing of the official son, and now they want to see some entertainment as well. And he said, "Truly I say to you, no prophet is acceptable in his hometown." And this is something that's recorded in all four Gospels, the statement. We looked at the example that was in Luke previously. It's interesting, I'll get to that on the next slide, about the doubts that are recorded from the people of Nazareth. So Luke records, "Is this not the son of Joseph?" Mark records, "Where did this man get these things? What's this wisdom that has been given to him? Where did this man get the power to do miracles?" Um, these first three argue against accepting his messianic claim. So he claimed to be the Messiah, and the townsfolk are just doubting. Who's this? We know you. Where'd you get this power? Kind of, who died and made you king? Kind of thought. And then the last four: "Is this not Joseph's son? Is this not the carpenter? Is this not Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" So you get seven distinct doubts, if you will, from the city. Really, the last four are kind of dismissive ad hominem, kind of like, "Who do you think you are?" kind of thought. You may recall that King David was also dismissed by Jesse and David's older brothers. They were stunned when Samuel anointed David. We got one more brother, but you don't want him because he's just a little runt and kind of good for nothing. So what Jesus says next here is tell two well-known stories about Elijah and Elisha that really get the townspeople. Verse 25, "But in truth I tell you, there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heavens were shut up 3 years and 6 months, and a great famine came over the land. And Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. And there were many lepers in Israel at the time of the prophet Elisha. None of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian. When they heard these things, all in the synagogue were filled with wrath." Let's take a look at why they might have been so wrathful. One thing that is helpful when looking at a little bit of geography is look where Nazareth is. So it's the red dot on these two maps. The map on the left shows the number of Elijah's escapades, and the map on the right shows Elisha's escapades. So you can see all around Nazareth to the south, all of this history occurred. So Jesus could have picked up on any of these, and yet what he chose to do was call out something that happened way up in Lebanon, and then something that happened to Naaman the Syrian. So the fact, what I'm trying to say is that Jesus singled out two stories involving Gentiles is all the more conspicuous when you consider that the people would have known all about Elijah and Elisha and kind of everything that happened right around Nazareth. This is a picture of Sidon. Sidon is to the north, right on the coast. It's in modern day Lebanon. And so the point is, of all the widows in Israel, Elijah was sent to none of them, but then he was sent to this Gentile up to the north. Similarly, of all the lepers in Israel, none of them was cleansed except for Naaman. Interesting story that Naaman was struck with leprosy. He tried to get an audience with Elisha and was denied, and so he was offended, and he was just going to march off, in a huff. And one of his servants said, "Hey, you might as well try it. You got nothing to lose," and he does, and he is cleansed. Okay, Jesus recounts these two stories, and then the next verse says, when they heard these things, all in the synagogue were filled with wrath. And our question, our quest is to find out why. Why were they filled with wrath? Many of the commentaries that we read, and this is another one of my mini rants, not to believe everything that is written in our commentaries, they speculate that it was the people were offended because Jesus is placing the Gentile religion, which is going to replace the Jewish religion. I would just caution you that the text does not say this. And later in Matthew 10 and Matthew 15, he instructs his disciples, and he says he has come for the lost sheep of Israel. So the problem that I have with that interpretation is it's taking the Jew versus Gentile divide, where Gentile Christianity became a religion distinct from Judaism. That evolved in the second and primarily the third and fourth centuries, cemented with Constantine. And it's taking that divide and superimposing it on a first century discussion. And as I talked about in a previous video, that's called an anachronistic fallacy. You're reading something back into the text. And just in general, stay away, or I should say, be cautious with anything that talks about replacement theology that says the church has replaced Israel. If you read the promises to the Jewish people in the Old Testament, they're unconditional, meaning that no matter how apostate the nation becomes, God still has his promises to those people. He has a very different set of promises to the church. So just keep that in mind as you're reading. I'm not saying I'm right or they're wrong or they're right and I'm wrong, but just keep questioning. It's when we believe we already have the truth, and then we stop asking questions, and that's when we stop learning. So an equally plausible theory is that they became upset because Jesus was saying, "You unbelieving people of Nazareth are not worthy of my miracles, so I'm going to head off to Capernaum." And then, that's when they were filled with wrath. Wrap up the story, verse 29, and they rose up and drove him out of the town and brought him to the brow of a hill on which their town was built so they could throw him down off the cliff. 30, but passing through their midst, he went away. Notice it doesn't say that there was any supernatural miracle. It doesn't, it doesn't say that he disappeared and reappeared or caused the people to part like Moses caused the Red Sea to part. It just says he went away. So it's fine to speculate on what might have happened, but just ultimately we need to not stray too much further than what the Bible actually tells us. They led them to the brow of the hill. The city was built in order to throw him down. This is a picture of the traditional location it's called Mount Precipice. And it's really nice because you can go up here and you get a nice, beautiful view of the Jezreel Valley. This probably wasn't the hill because the original city was more to the north, and so it could have been the northern hill. But interestingly, the Christian sect was called the Nazarenes. So Jesus was known as Jesus the Nazarene. So eventually, enough of them came to believe in Jesus after all that at least a few in the city redeemed themselves and they weren't totally forsaken. After this, Jesus will make his way to Capernaum, and this really closes out what's called the private Galilean ministry, and then his trip to Capernaum, which we'll see in the next chapter in Luke and in the Synoptic Gospels, will be the public, or sometimes it's called the Great Galilean Ministry. Next lesson will be on John chapter 5 and the pools of Bethesda in Jerusalem, but then really after that is the next 15 or so lessons will all be set in Galilee. So we'll have have a good grasp of what's going on in Galilee and his public ministry. So thanks a lot. So as we close, I want to draw your attention to this 3-minute video segment from Following the Messiah on the rejection at Nazareth. I love this series that these guys have put together. They've done a great job, high quality video, nice transitions and that kind of thing. So really nice job. So I'll have the link in the description at the end of the video. Let's look at our application questions for this lesson. First question is more of a theological one. Jesus did a number of healings, but only a few of these are recorded in detail. So the question is, why do I think the Holy Spirit wanted me to know the specifics regarding this one, regarding the official from Capernaum and his son? What value in there? Nothing is in Scripture by accident, so every detail is there by design, and the point is for us to figure out why it's there and what Jesus and the Holy Spirit want us to know from that. Second question is, what aspect of the rejection is most striking to me? So there's a number of different reactions that the people had. Some of them, it appears at the very beginning, they accepted his teaching. Some of them said, well, who is this? Who are you? I know you. Who do you think you are, and all that. And then ultimately, looks like a fair number of them ended up in anger at his message regarding Elisha and Elijah. So what part of that is most striking to you? And then what would you have done if you had been in the Nazareth congregation that day? So it's always easy to say I would be the one to stand up against the crowd, but would you have really? It's nice to examine yourself, or maybe another way to say that is, suppose Jesus came to my church today and gave the same message, what would my reaction be? We think we always want to believe we're on the right track, and I hope we are. But if Jesus came in and said, nope, you're absolutely on the wrong track, what would you do? Would you, shoot the messenger, or would we try to learn from that? And then in really making it personal, number 4, in what ways do I act in disbelief, and in what ways do I reject Jesus, the same way that those people in Nazareth did? Is there anything right now that I need to confess my disbelief? So take a moment, think upon that, and we will see you on the next lesson.